Hey everybody, my name is Taylor Hersom. I'm the Chief Security Officer here at RSI, and today we are here to present to you the CyberCompass initiative as well as our virtual CISO services. So everybody on this call was able to see the Tuesday Teleris partner call, and so we were able to provide a lot of information to y'all in just a few in a 20-minute period, and I know it was a 20,000 foot view, so we wanted to take this time to really make a webinar that answers all the questions that y'all may have, do a little bit deeper dive in terms of what our solution is and how it pertains to your business model. I do want this to be open dialogue, and I want people to feel comfortable in asking questions throughout rather than waiting till the end. So I'm going to do a quick introduction on my background and myself, and then David Bergeson will also do a quick introduction, and then we'll get started. So as I had mentioned, I'm the Chief Security Officer at RSI. I started my career at Deloitte, one of the big four accounting firms, where I spent a number of years in the audit space and then transitioned into cybersecurity and compliance. And so David Bergeson, who is on the call, is the COO of RSI, and had brought me over to put our heads together in terms of how we can redefine cybersecurity at RSI. David, you want to give a quick introduction?
Unmute me, Taylor.
Nope, that might help.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Hey, thanks, Taylor. Hello, everybody. My name is David Bergeson, and I have been working with the channels, in particular the Teleris channel partners, for about 12 years now. But I've been in channels for probably 25, 30 years. Was one of the original ones that started this concept way back when. I'm not going to say I'm the inventor, but I'm certainly the one that helped drive this program for many partners throughout the years. My role here is the Chief Operating Officer of Renaissance Systems. I pretty much make most of the decisions along with Taylor. And my job is to make your job as easy as possible, to provide the tools that's going to make it simple, to remove the complexities, also drive that customer satisfaction, drive strategy within your client base. If we're not meeting any of those expectations, I want to know about it so we can make it as best as possible for you. My next job after that is to increase the satisfaction not only of the client, but also of people like you, right? Which means paying the commissions on time, making sure that you guys are getting the tools you need. And then also, being the ear for you so I can be a sounding board for your ideas as well. So if you have any questions or any complaints or comments, reach out to me directly, please, and I will be happy to engage you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, David. All right, so in terms of today's presentation, what we're going to be covering is a quick overview for those that are not aware of the current cybersecurity and compliance landscape, and why risk assessments really fit in at the crux of every client's needs as it relates to security and compliance. And then we're going to talk about how CyberCompass differentiates in this space and how you can use it to identify leads and leverage our team to ensure that you are successful going forward. Again, I have removed the mute from everybody, so I would love for you to chime in and ask questions as needed. So let's talk about the current cybersecurity and compliance landscape. So the way that companies are traditionally managing their risk is a bit outdated, and unfortunately it's for a variety of reasons. So you've got every organization in the world that has to worry about security risk and compliance risk. So whether it's the grocery store that you're shopping at, whether it's the doctor's office that you visit, we all have a different type of security and compliance risk that we fall under. And so the biggest issue is that because of all the data breaches and because of all of the recent threats to organizations, we have regulators that are popping up left and right, it seems, to come out with new regulations to try to get companies' security posture up to snuff. And so you have all these cyber regulations that people aren't even aware of half the time that organizations suddenly have to fall under. So when I say a regulation, I'm talking the big dogs like the HIPAAs and the GDPRs, the PCIs, you've probably heard all of these acronyms, and they all affect different types of organizations. But we also have these data privacy laws that are affecting individual states. So what is not often known is that 42 out of the 50 states in the U.S. have some form of data privacy law either passed already or in the process of passing. And so you have these organizations that don't even realize they fall under state level regulations. All of you know, if you're reading the news, data breaches are absolutely crippling organizations. 60% of small businesses, SMBs actually, are going out of business after experiencing a breach. And then the real problem is that we have built this traditional model of relying on professional services to get anything done. And so everybody's been offering the same type of risk assessment service. And so whether you're hiring a mom and pop shop or you're hiring a huge conglomerate to conduct a risk assessment for you and help you identify and remediate risks, it's essentially the same service. And so what this leads to is a very expensive approach to identifying and remediating security and compliance risks impacting your organizations. And so the last thing that I'll say is that companies are going about it the wrong way. They're designing their security environments around a million different vendors that don't play well together, and they're hoping that they can piecemeal together different technologies and different people with different skill sets, and they hope that it will address all of their cybersecurity needs when they're not even really sure what those needs are. And so this screenshot pretty much summarizes what the current cybersecurity vendor landscape looks like. As you can see, these are all different areas related to cybersecurity, and there are a billion different companies out there. And the problem is if you start piecemealing together these different vendors and start picking a random vendor in each category, for instance, then it results in something like this. And so you're piecemealing together an IT environment that you hope is going to work appropriately to address your risks, and that's just not feasible. And so what we push here at RSI is risk assessments. This is where everything starts. In order for you to understand the risks that are impacting your organization and how to remediate them, you first have to know what those risks are. And so to build that roadmap and to build the appropriate plan, you need to start with a risk assessment. One of the biggest confusions that we get, especially with Telarus partners, is the difference between pen testing and vulnerability assessments and risk assessments. So I wanted to clear that up because it's a big question, and it's a perfectly fair question. We have these vendors that just use the terminology so loosely that it's very confusing. So the way we explain it is vulnerability assessments and pen testing are pretty similar in that vulnerability assessments, they're looking at a specific system or a specific portion of your IT environment. It's kind of like a lab-controlled scenario where they're looking at a specific portion of your IT environment and they're looking for known vulnerabilities, meaning that these have been identified by the masses as a vulnerability and they're looking for them in your environment. And so the difference between pen testing is that it's very similar in that regard, except that with pen testing, they're looking for those vulnerabilities, and then they're looking for ways that they can exploit those vulnerabilities. So the way we describe it is essentially vulnerability assessment is going up and checking to see if your front door is unlocked. If it's unlocked, then that's a vulnerability. With pen testing, they go up and they check to see if your front door is unlocked, and then they walk through it. And so that's the difference between those. Now, a risk assessment is a much more strategic, wide lens of your entire IT environment. It takes into account all different types of security risks based on regulation or frameworks, cybersecurity frameworks, and it incorporates all of these into an assessment to identify your critical systems and assets and understand the impact of various risks as they relate to the confidentiality of your data, the integrity of your data, and the availability of your data. Any questions around that? All right. So to give you some perspective, this is what a typical CISO or a typical cybersecurity professional needs to worry about from a high-level overview. And you can see a little bitty down in the bottom right corner that pen testing and vulnerability management are two important aspects of it, but they're two of many. And so a risk assessment incorporates all sorts of things on this list. It incorporates all facets, whereas pen testing and vulnerability management are just subsets of one category. Unfortunately, when you start to take this into consideration and you realize that folks don't have cybersecurity professionals and they don't have the right context, then this equates to essentially what their security environment becomes. And you don't want that. You don't want it to be a wide gamut of understanding and saying essentially that you only have the basics covered. So like access management and having basic vulnerability management in place. If you only take into consideration these certain aspects, then you're missing a wide range of security risks impacting your organization. So we've talked about all of that. We've talked about why risk assessments are important. I just want to briefly touch on why what we've done at RSI to differentiate ourselves in this space. So we went into it very high level on the Telarus Tuesday call, so I just want to delve in just a little bit further. The way that we explain it to partners is that risk assessments are the tip of your spear. They are the way for you to get your foot in the door and to help customers understand that, hey, I need to take a risk assessment in order to understand what risks are impacting my organization, and then I can figure out what technologies I need to roll out to better address these risks. But the cool thing for you is that once we go through these risk assessments, well, then we've identified a variety of risks that need remediation efforts. And those remediation efforts oftentimes lead to sales efforts. So we're providing this very strategic roadmap of risks impacting an organization, and they're ranked by criticality. But that risk map or that roadmap is actually a roadmap of sales opportunities for you. And we talk about this a lot, but we can't stress it enough that the Telarus partner has a very unique advantage with CyberCompass in becoming the strategic security advisor for an organization and bringing in these new technologies that can greatly reduce their security risk posture. But the cool thing is that once they've remediated, that's not the end. This journey is never ending, and it's something that they have to continually maintain. And so once they have remediated their risks, well, then they need to build in people, processes, and technology to actually stay on top of those risks. So you've remediated, you've addressed them, and then you need to stay on top of them, building formal processes, controls, having the right people in place, the right technologies to stay on top of these risks and ensure they don't pop back up. And so all of these cycles right here are different sales opportunities for the Telarus partner, and it really is fundamentally the easiest way for you to get sales opportunities with all of the other Telarus suppliers in the security portfolio. So let's talk about CyberCompass just a little bit. We didn't get to show it off during that call because we were flying through at lightning speed. So one of the biggest things that we've accomplished with CyberCompass is we've provided a risk assessment and risk management platform. And so first and foremost, we're conducting these risk assessments based on the framework or the regulation of your customer's choosing. So whether it's the HIPAA and the GDPR and the PCI that we've talked about, or maybe they care more about going beyond compliance and achieving total security, that's when we use things like the NIST cybersecurity framework, the CIS Critical 20 control framework. We've got all kinds of different best practices incorporated into our tool that are easily understood for the end user because we've rewritten every single requirement to be for the business user rather than the technical user. And so first and foremost, we are able to customize our platform for your customer's specific needs, whether they want to self-assess themselves on a risk through a risk assessment or they want to hire our firm to conduct a risk assessment, we can support that. And so because the platform automates and streamlines so many different facets of the risk assessment process, we have dramatically reduced the time it takes to conduct a risk assessment, which also dramatically reduces the cost to your end customer. And so we go through and we conduct a risk assessment and identify all of these different risks impacting an organization. We ask them specific questions, we gather notes, we gather screenshots, we do all of these great things that are rebuilt into our database by our tool. And what that does is it generates that roadmap that we talked about. It generates a very customized risk report that they can use to provide to their auditors, to provide to their board of directors, to provide to any interested stakeholders. But then we go beyond that. Remember I said that we do risk assessments and then we do risk management. So we provide every customer a year subscription to our tool. And what that does is it allows them to use our CyberCompass tool in order to track and remediate the issues that were identified in the risk assessment. So what you can see right here is just one of the issues that was identified in a sample risk assessment. You can see things like the location that it was asked at, the department that was interviewed. You can see dates. You can see all of the information related to the issue that was identified. But then you can see there's a threat response. So we don't just provide them what they're doing wrong. We provide them information on how they can do it right. And so they have this very powerful issues log that allows them to see what they're supposed to be doing. And then if you can see, I don't know if y'all can see my mouse, but you can see the notes and attachments section. They can start documenting their remediation efforts directly in the tool. And it's building into our database, and it's allowing them to keep this audit trail of everything they're doing to remediate their issues. The coolest part about that is that we talked about that risk report that they get at the end of a risk assessment. Well, that's a point-in-time approach, and that's something that we really wanted to address when we built CyberCompass, is that we didn't want to do point-in-time. We wanted to offer continuous value. And so that risk assessment report, while it's very paramount in the entire risk process, what we do with this screenshot right here, it shows you that they can add their notes and their attachments. Well, what's happening is as they're doing that and as they're remediating these issues, they can mark it as closed, and we can rebuild that report as many times as they want. So now they have a continuous improvement log to show their stakeholders the progress they've made. Another cool part of the tool is that we've added all these different features into the tool that help them to remediate their risks just by using the tool. And so one of the biggest pain points for a customer is the policies and procedures generator, or policies and procedures management rather. And so coming up with all these policies and procedures and all this documentation that you're supposed to have in place for every major regulation, it's very tedious. It's very time consuming. It costs a company a lot of money just because of the time and effort that goes into it. And so what we do is we take pieces of information from the customer, such as the industry that they're in and the size of their organization, and we've built in a policy and procedure generator into the tool. And so they can very quickly hit the generate button and have a very robust set of policies and procedures geared towards their specific industry. And so you can see on this particular example, it has generated a very robust 185-page policies and procedures document that they can now download and hit the ground running with. So another big portion of our tool that we've addressed is vendor management. I'm sure y'all have heard this term many times, and it's one of the biggest risks impacting organizations. It's very hard to keep track of all the vendors you do business with and what they have access to in your system. So we've addressed that with our tool. We provide this vendor management module that allows you to create a profile on each vendor you do business with, to document what they have access to in your environment, and then to keep things on file such as signed BAAs, any sort of terms and uses agreement, having SOC 2 reports and risk assessment questionnaires. All of these things you can keep in the file, and we have an archived or a document vault where you can centrally locate all of this information. We have a reminder system built in, so you can set expiration and renewal dates, and then you can also follow back up with them to provide their annual, to request that they provide their annual attestation to compliance of your requirements. And so one of the cool things that we can also accomplish with our tool is we can send your vendors a risk assessment directly through our tool, and they can fill out a questionnaire and have that same positive experience through CyberCompass, but it all gets logged back on your profile, on your customer's profile rather, and you can keep that managed in a central location. So let's start to talk about sales opportunities for the Telarus partners. That's what we're all here for. That's what I want to make sure that I answer for y'all. But in order for you to understand, you first need to understand how we package this within Telarus. So we break it down into 3 packages, really. So if you have these customers that are either a little bit cognizant of or a little bit limited on their budget for cybersecurity, then we can go the self-assessment route. What that is it's a SaaS solution of access to our CyberCompass tool, and it allows them to self-assess themselves on any of the major regulations or frameworks within the tool. And with that, they also receive a certain amount of remote virtual CISO support. So in the tool, they have a support tab that dials directly to our help desk 24/7, and it also has my contact information as well. So suddenly they have a virtual CISO in their pocket that can help them even when they're self-conducting an assessment. The next portion of that, because of our tool and because of what we've been able to accomplish with it, we are able to conduct a risk assessment completely remotely. And so what that allows us to do is avoid the costs associated with travel and with lodging and food and all of those things, and conduct these powerful risk assessments completely remote. Our tool has the capability for us to do either a risk assessment interview with the client through a webinar, or we can also assign questions to specific users throughout the organization, and all of that comes back and is centrally organized and managed by our tool. Now, we have a lot of customers out there that either require someone to be on site or prefer to have someone hold their hand and be on site, and so we do offer that as well. And so the on-site support is the same support that you would get through a remote assessment, but we would be there on site, and the travel costs would be absorbed by the client. And then finally, we've talked a lot about the risk assessment process, but RSI doesn't stop there. RSI has a vision to achieve to help customers achieve cybersecurity and compliance best practices throughout their entire IT program from start to finish. And there really isn't a finish. There is we call it a journey because it is an ongoing journey. No matter where the customer is at in their journey, they start with a risk assessment, but they have that continuous involvement throughout the process that we talked about earlier. So RSI has a variety of virtual CISOs that we can offer services such as ad hoc services around disaster recovery and business continuity, or we can be that outsourced virtual CISO for them if they need someone on their staff that actually manages their security from a governance standpoint. We can help them build out controls. We can help them with their remediation efforts. We can help them with a variety of things around consulting, around the IT governance aspect of your risk assessment posture, risk posture. And the coolest part about this whole process is that RSI specializes in building the people and processes side around every risk identified. So helping customers to make sure that they have the right people and the right processes, the right documentation built in. We don't try to be those technology gurus because we know we have the Telarus partner to rely on for that. And so this is very much a partnership where we leverage your expertise and are able to bring you in to advise on a variety of technologies when a customer needs it. So we're not going to try to be that vulnerability monitoring arm. We're not going to try to bring in the IBMs of the world. We rely on you to do that, and what that does is it increases your opportunity for commissions. Any questions around that thus far?
Howdy, Taylor. When you guys do your initial assessment, do you guys input all the data into CyberCompass, or do you expect the customer to put that in when getting started?
That's a great question. So the biggest thing, the biggest differentiator on that is with whether it's the self-assessment or the risk assessment conducted by RSI. If it is the self-assessment, we rely on them to upload the evidence. Anytime they answer yes to a question, we ask that they put evidence into the tool to verify that what they're answering is correct. What we do is on the back end, we help them to validate that what that evidence is appropriate to address that risk. When we are doing the risk assessment ourselves, we leave that option up to the customer. We are happy to upload those notes and attachments. We typically do that on the front end, but if it's something that they can't get a hold of right then and there, then we give them the option to either go in the tool and upload it themselves or to send it to us and we upload.
All right, appreciate it.
And we are taking notes throughout the engagement, so the notes portion is updated by the consultant. That's something we also provide in our risk report. That's what we provide to the customer in the issues log so that they can see kind of the context from the consultant's perspective and have that additional information to add value to the risk assessment. All right, so let's talk about the good stuff. Let's talk about how to identify leads. the biggest thing that I want y'all to understand is that risk as it relates to security and compliance impacts every single organization in the world. It impacts your organizations, in fact. But there are the proverbial lower hanging fruit out there for customers that may need your help more than others. And so these are kind of the 4 areas that we like to focus on. One of the big ones is energy. That's being hit the hardest with malicious hackers throughout the world. Unfortunately, energy is one of those industries where they don't have very stringent compliance requirements, and therefore their security is all over the place. And folks are taking advantage of this because energy is arguably one of our most important industries out there. People get pissed when they can't watch Netflix, when they can't plug in, charge their iPhones. I mean, energy, in all seriousness, it's a very significant impact on the world when this is impacted. And so energy clients are unfortunately struggling right now with ransomware specifically. So is higher education. I think if everyone on this call can agree, if you're reading the news, you see more than anything schools that are being impacted by ransomware. The reason for this is unfortunately due to the fact that they have the lowest budget, or that they have not had any historic requirements, and therefore they have not done much to protect the data that they house on their students and faculty. And so when you incorporate the fact that so many schools have already been hit, and there have been so many success stories on the hacker side, on the malicious user side, in regards to ransomware, it's just opened the floodgates, because it's so easy to fire off ransomware that these script kiddies can do it with no skill set, really. I mean, you can get on the dark web these days and buy ransomware for $50, and it comes with help desk support. And it's just making it way too easy for malicious users. The other issue is healthcare. So healthcare obviously has some of the most important data out there. They're gathering all these metrics. Everyone's always worried about PII, so addresses, phone numbers, social security numbers. But the real risk is actually around the health conditions that are recorded on every person. So you can use that data to really negatively impact someone's life. You can use that data to basically take advantage of a user's identity and do a lot more with it than you'd be able to do if you just had like an address and a phone number and a name. And so there's folks out there now that are creating entire shadow profiles, and they're taking out student loans, they're buying houses, they're buying and selling cars. It's crazy what you can do with some of the data these days, because the industries as a whole have not caught up in regards to the negative impact of having such a lax requirement around what data you need to provide in order to obtain services and products. And then the last one, I think a lot of people can argue that it's not an industry, but I put it on here because we look at it as an entire industry. SMBs are unfortunately some of the most attacked and most ignorant businesses out there, because they think, I mean, if I had $1 for every time I heard this, they think that, oh, I don't have data that anyone would want, or I'm too small, or I'm not even in an industry that's high risk. We hear all these excuses, and the problem is that if you think about it from a small, medium business standpoint, I'm sure a lot of people can speak to this. If you do not have access to your IT systems and data for a short amount of time, that can really cripple you. And unfortunately, you rely on all this data to operate your business, and without access to it, you're essentially doomed. And so you have this ransomware again that's being manipulated. You have these social engineering attacks that people can easily steal or lock down data, and it completely cripples an organization. And unfortunately, small and medium businesses either think they don't need security, or they don't feel like they have the budget to adopt a cybersecurity program. And it's just creating a lot of hardships across the board. So let's talk about briefly where we're seeing success, because I want to start planting that seed in terms of how you identify opportunities. We've talked about CyberCompass in the essence of a traditional risk assessment and a risk management platform, but the opportunities really are pretty boundless. And so let's talk about first And real quick, I don't expect y'all to be able to read this. These are placeholders, so we have talking discussions. These are all on our pricing tool, which we will announce at the end of the call so that you can get access to these resources and use them however you wish. And so the first one is identifying a recent success story that we had where we had a large client that serves a number of insurance brokers in the state of New York. And in New York, they have a cybersecurity regulation. It's called the NYCRR 500. And what it requires is that all financial services and insurance brokers in the state of New York that do not qualify for an exemption, and for y'all that don't know about the exemptions, it's very few limited professionals out there. If you don't qualify for it, you have all of these requirements that you have to meet. It's crazy. It's everything from incorporating multi-factor authentication on all your critical systems to actually having a CISO or a virtual CISO on your staff. There's things related to change management and segregation of duties and vulnerability monitoring. It's pretty crazy. And so a lot of companies in the state of New York got blindsided. And so we worked with this association to build CyberCompass into an actual platform that brokers could use to self-assess themselves on the NYDFS requirement. And they could also take a risk assessment in our tool that is a requirement of the NYDFS cybersecurity regulation. And so they were able to not only see where they stood with the NYDFS, but they could also start checking boxes just by using CyberCompass. So there were policies and procedures requirements in there that we immediately addressed just by using our tool. And we were able to roll this tool out to over 1,500 different brokers in the state of New York. And so this was a very powerful example of how our tool could fit in for organizations that need to manage risk across many locations and departments. So no longer are we just that granular risk assessment for a single location, but we're a very powerful risk management platform for customers that have a lot of locations. So now, if you think about it, let's take a franchise, for example. Franchises have their conglomerate HQ, their overarching brand, and then they franchise out to these mom and pop locations. But if you think about it, even if a mom and pop Chick-fil-A location is breached, the brand damage associated with that breach does not just affect that mom and pop, it affects the entire brand. And so you think about these things and suddenly it really opens the door for Telarus partners to identify leads for these larger organizations. So the second example is actually identifying one of our initial success stories where we were contacted by a law firm whose customer was unknowingly breached in that they were uploading their data onto GitHub, and they were using this for their development environment, and unfortunately they were using production data. And so a random CISO found his personally identifiable information on GitHub, and he reported them to HIPAA. And so what many people don't know is that HIPAA is governed by the Office of Civil Rights, and that is their auditing arm. And so the HIPAA OCR contacted this customer, and they said, hey, we were notified. You have 2 weeks to provide us a risk assessment on your current security posture and to provide us all the policies and procedures you have in place and a write-up of what you were doing about this specific vulnerability. And so they started contacting everybody. They got all these different quotes. Everybody was quoting six-figure prices and 6 to 8 week turnaround. And remember, they only had 2 weeks to turn this around. And so honestly, CyberCompass was kind of their last-ditch effort. They had seen an advertisement. They saw that we could do rapid remediation. And so they contacted us, and we were able to take on this provider. And it was 150 employees spread across 4 locations. We were able to conduct a full risk assessment in 4 days, do 3 iterations of the risk report, and issue that to the OCR along with the policies and procedures requirement and the write-up. And the OCR accepted the risk report, and they dropped all fines. And so now we've identified this unique opportunity in these folks that are experiencing ransomware attacks, or they're experiencing breaches, they're experiencing regulators auditing them. We are able to help them get through those things and have a very powerful tool that answers a lot of questions for auditors and regulators. Any questions around that process? Y'all are making it easy on me. All right, so let's talk briefly. This is the last section that we want to overview, is how y'all can leverage us to ensure your success. And then we'll open it up to questions in general. David, I ask that you start monitoring the chat, and if you'll provide those questions after we get through this section. So let's talk for a moment about RSI as a whole. Everybody loves CyberCompass and it loves what we're doing, but that's just the first part of our vision. We are establishing ourselves as a cybersecurity leader in the Telarus portfolio that helps customers throughout their entire journey, whether it's cybersecurity or it's compliance. We assist them using technologies and innovation throughout this entire life cycle. What this does is it allows us to build a very solid relationship with your customers, which then extends the contract, which then extends the commissions and enhances the value that you're bringing to those customers. That's our vision. We are working on tools and additional value adds that we can provide to your customers in the coming months. CyberCompass is enhancing, and we've got other things in the pipeline that are all designed around your customers. And one thing I want to point out is that related to that, everything we build is around Telarus partners. We have exclusivity to Telarus. We do not have a direct sales team. We don't sell to anyone else. We're not with any other masters. And that's a big value add in that, one, you'll have exclusivity with us, but two, you have a peace of mind knowing that everything we design is for you, because we can't be successful without you. The other thing that we've really built out and we are continuing to build out is our deep industry knowledge. One of the things I hope that y'all agree with every time you interact with anybody from the RSI team is that we all know what we're talking about. We have worked for years on our craft before we ever.
Howdy. My wife's.
Cool, man.
Yeah, man.
I like those. My mother-in-law had one.
They're fun. They're quick. They're easy. Gas
I'm
mileage
gonna
is
mute
good.
you real quick. There we go. All right. So, and I'll take y'all off mute in a moment. But yeah, so I hope that everyone can agree that what we have done to hone our craft in cybersecurity and compliance is paying off for y'all. And if you ever feel differently, I hope that, again, what David had said, if you're never 100% happy with us, I hope that you'll bring it to our attention so that we can address it. Another thing that we are continuing to work on, and this is a first iteration of, is doing things like demos and webinars and presentations. We're constantly pushing our brand on social media and pushing our brand directly with the Telarus partners so that we can provide constant value to you and stay at the front of your minds. What we want is for RSI to be at the front of your minds anytime risk, security, compliance comes up with your clients, and that's the brand that we're building. Another thing that I hope that everybody on this call can attest to is our always available mentality. David and myself took on this mindset very early on that we wanted to always be directly available. We didn't want to send you to some 1-800 number. We didn't want to send you to our help desk and not be able to get a hold of us directly. We wanted quick turnaround. We wanted quick proposals, quick questions answered. We continue to strive to maintain this, and it's something that we are actually, with our recent success, wanting to expand upon by growing our team so that you have more resources at your disposal and getting even quicker turnaround than what you've experienced thus far. And then finally, one of the biggest things that we love to do is build tools that enhance the value you're bringing to your partners. To your clients. And so what we've done is we've developed tools that, in addition to CyberCompass, which obviously was very much built with partners in mind, we've developed these other tools that you, the partner, can be using to enhance that value. First of which is our pricing tool. And I realized I did not put a slide in here with the URL. And so what I will do is I will send out an email after this call to everybody on the webinar so that you have a link to our new pricing tool. So the RSI pricing tool is a quick, easy, efficient tool for you to go to from a URL and enter your email, enter a number of employees and number of locations, and you'll instantly be able to get a quote on any of our 3 packages. So you'll also be able to see things in there like the additional services that we offer and incorporate those into the pricing model. You'll see that our pricing is very easy to understand, easy to swallow for your customers because we spread it out over the course of a year. And so first and foremost, that's a big value add for you to be able to get the no BS pricing estimate. I will say that it is just an estimate. We love for you to work with us on the pricing so that we can make sure that we're strategic for every client that you service. And then the other value add for that pricing tool is that we also provide resources. So we provide resources for both you and for your customers. And so we want you to be on there looking for our latest and greatest marketing materials and seeing what CyberCompass has to offer and RSI in general. We're going to continue to expand on this and build our brand around this tool in addition to the Telarus back office. We're going to be updating it so that it shows our recent YouTube videos, our recent social media posts, and so you'll be able to have one central repository for all of this. And then in the next couple of months, we are very proud to announce our Cyber Quick Check tool, which is going to allow for partners to have a white label opportunity with a tool that allows you to walk through your customers through a 12-question risk assessment. And what this does is it allows you to, one, have information that you can talk to your clients about immediately. So you don't have to be a cybersecurity expert. You can use these questions as a baseline to have really deep conversations with your customer and identify some significant needs early on. And then what it will allow you to also do is once they take this assessment, you, with the white label opportunity, will be able to get the results of that assessment and understand from a high level some sales opportunities with that customer. It's a very great conversation starter. And again, it all points back to you. So this white label opportunity will have your contact information, your logo, your About Us page, and it's all built for the Telarus partner. And as I had mentioned, this is coming out in the next couple of months. We will be doing an announcement, and we are going to be figuring out ways that we can incorporate this directly into the Telarus model, maybe through the app, maybe just through the website, but regardless, this information will be provided to you soon. We are very excited about it so that you can hit the ground running in 2020. All right, so I have done plenty of talking. I would love to answer some questions for the folks on here. And David, I don't know if you got any questions to kind of get us kicked off in the chat. Maybe we can start there, and I will unmute everybody here.
Yep. So the first one is going to be from Dan. He says, "What are the risks of a self-assessment? For customers who ask why not choose the self-assessment option, does a self-assessment protect you from regulatory risk?"
Fantastic question as always, Dan. So to answer that question in a nutshell, because they are self-assessing themselves, that unfortunately they don't get as much of the assurance with that type of risk assessment simply because they are self-attesting. Oftentimes auditors and regulators need a third-party perspective to validate that what they are doing is appropriate, and so it kind of limits the impact that they can make. However, for customers that are just starting their cybersecurity and compliance journey, or that they're managing a ton of locations, it's very hard for them to keep track of all the risks impacting their organization. So if they're just starting, for example, they kind of want to get answers to the test before they take the test, and self-assessment allows them to do that. It still provides much of the benefit, and then they can hire third parties such as ourselves to come in and do that formal attestation of their current risk posture. Or better yet, they can self-identify some risks, tackle a few of them, and then come in and get a risk assessment to get a better score. So that's kind of what the opportunity is around self-assessment. It also allows for those customers that have tons of locations where they're sending consultants manually to locations, or even worse, they're just not even conducting risk assessments at all their locations. This helps them to at least identify a risk impacting individual locations that can be centrally managed by their HQ, and they can conduct more formalized risk assessments in that manner through their headquarters.
Yep. The other question from Dan is, are you going to talk about Cyber Quick Check, and are you going to have time to show that? Because I think that's a very powerful tool, because people are asking about pricing as well.
Absolutely. I'm actually, sorry, great question. I should have clarified. I will show both of those on this call. I just wanted to make sure we answered questions first. Any other questions, David, in the chat?
Not yet.
Okay.
Hey, Taylor,
Anybody
I did have another
have
question, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, it was we were talking about small and medium businesses, and something that you didn't mention was PCI compliance, because just about everybody accepts credit cards. And I've been hearing about credit card processing firms are actually starting to require people doing risk assessments if they're subject to PCI. Are you seeing that, or is that something I'm just hearing?
That is something that we have been seeing so recently. They are finally getting their act together in terms of how they audit these firms that are accepting credit cards because of the massive amount of breaches out there. It's just now catching up. They haven't even had any formal regulation outside of PCI, but PCI, they're starting to audit firms left and right. And then also, like what you said, for some of these credit card providers, they are requiring a minimum security posture to be incorporated before they'll even do business with them. So yeah, great question. That's PCI is definitely low-hanging fruit because it just impacts so many organizations. And if you think about it, for typical organizations that accept credit card payments, they oftentimes have more than one location. And the PCI compliance posture does not just affect the headquarters. So you have to kind of replicate the process throughout every one of your locations. And it's very hard for them to kind of understand how to stay on top of that across multiple locations.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. So can y'all see my screen? I'm assuming so. Y'all just interrupt me if you can't, but what I'm showing first of all is the Cyber Quick Check. And so this is the tool that we've been developing for Telarus partners exclusively. And what this allows you to do is, again, walk a client through, or just a lead through a risk assessment. And so we talk about why this is important. You can see here that we can put the brand, your logo on here, your contact information, your website, everything points back to you. The contact page, again, once they come in here and they fill this out, that will go back to this contact. So you'll get the email, not us. And then the about page also shows a about you. And so then again, it points all back to you. What we are actually going to be doing in the coming weeks is incorporating a required contact page before they can start an assessment. So right now, they can just start a Cyber Quick Check, and so the contact information is optional. But what we're going to do is before they can answer this first question, they are going to be required to put in basic contact information, and they will be able to put in their industry, and it will actually give them a more catered questionnaire. So what you can see here is a very simple question. What we did is we took 12 heavy hitter questions that have a wide spread impact across multiple regulations, and we tie it back to the regulations. So you can see here, if you're one of those weirdos that likes to read through these, you can actually click on these and it links to HIPAA's requirement around risk management. So this is a very powerful tool in identifying leads with a specific customer. We also explain everything in layman's terms for the business user so that they can understand exactly why this question is important. And then once they go through a risk assessment, you will, if I could ever get through this darn thing. It's 12 questions total. It keeps track of their progress. The other cool thing I forgot to point out, they can click finish later and they're provided a code, and they can enter that code to continue a risk assessment at any given time. But once they get through this, the results are scored. And so what they can do is they get a score of their total cybersecurity posture based on those 12 questions, and then they are given recommendations. All of this can be customized, and these get started links can all point back to your website. They can point back, we've been approached by some partners that would want to do a customized CyberCompass page on their website, and we can do that. And really just customize this to bring the most value to you. But the cool part is that they get a ton of insight very quickly into their current security posture. You get a ton of insight, and they can do a few other things in here to add value. So they can go back and view their answers, for instance, and see where they failed, where they passed. This is another cool feature that we did not show off before. but this actually gives them a sample risk assessment report. So they can come in here and it populates all their contact information in here, and it shows who it was provided by, which will be you, and then it will show an overview and a summary. You've got all kinds of different, this is what they can, this example is what they would expect to see from CyberCompass. And so this is very powerful. It allows them to understand kind of the value they're getting, the types of risks they need to be thinking about. It's very cool. It adds a ton of value. Any questions around that process? All right. So we only have a few minutes left, and I'm going to quickly show off the pricing tool that we have built for the Telarus partners as well. So this pricing tool is what we talked about before. As I had mentioned, it makes it very easy for you to come in, enter your email, and enter the number of employees and number of locations here, and you can get a quote. And so you come in here and you can see our pricing, and you can get details around each of the packages here, and you can download a quote actually. So you will be able to get a quoted document from this and again, this is just an estimate. It's something that would need to be finalized for every contract signed and whatnot, and we can talk about pricing that's most strategic for your individual client needs. It's very hard to gauge a client's individual needs based on number of locations and employees and all these different factors on their budget and how many locations they want to factor in. It's very hard to take all of that into consideration in a single algorithm, but this at least gives you a ballpark so that you can begin having those conversations with your customer to understand budget. One of the biggest struggles that we have noticed through our partnership is that customers oftentimes have never gone through this process before. And so you see $600 a month, $7,200 a year, and some customers think that's wildly expensive when they have never gotten the perspective that the average risk assessment in the U.S. is almost 50 grand. And so while we can say we're 80% less than the competitors, which is absolutely true, for someone that doesn't have that perspective, sometimes it's harder for them to swallow. So again, we have some wiggle room. We are able to talk to you about pricing and how we strategically align it with your customers. One of the other cool things about this tool is that you can see some of the other services that we offer here, and you can click these and it will update the pricing up here and spread it out over the course of a year. The last thing I want to show you in our last couple minutes here is the Resource Center. So we're greatly expanding the capabilities here to show things like social media posts, videos, and whatnot. But right now, we already have it ready to go with the resources that you can use for your customers and for yourself. And so here's some we've got our battle cards in here. We've got our sales sheet in here. And then for the clients, we have some success stories, an outline of our virtual CISO services. We've got a variety of benefits. And then finally, our contact information is here. And so we've got David on here. We've got myself. We're linked to our LinkedIn pages. David and I are always talking about security and some of the other things that RSI is working on our LinkedIn pages. So we're going to continue to expand on that and want you to have those resources for at your fingertips at any given time. Any other questions that I can answer for the partners on the call?
Taylor, just real quick, and I hope this isn't a long thing, but one of the things I've noticed is that we talked about healthcare and HIPAA, and that marketplace is a lot more mature than other ones because it's been around the longest, I think. What do you see as like a good way to get into a healthcare organization that may actually have already started an assessment?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is that oftentimes healthcare organizations are so worried about audits, which are related to financial rather than to security and compliance risk. And so the first thing is educating them on saying, hey, you going through an audit is great for your stakeholders, but it's not great for your customers, your patients, your brand in general, because all of that information is privately held. And so it's related to their books. It's because of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, and it doesn't actually have as big of an impact as your overall security posture as a healthcare organization. So educating them on that, helping them to understand, hey, you actually need to go beyond that to ensure that you have a appropriate cybersecurity program. That's one of our bigger identifiers for healthcare. The other big thing is just talking to them about how they are currently protecting their patient health information, how they are currently identifying risks around those, because we get asked a lot, like how we're different from HIPAA Secure Now, for example. Tools like that, they advertise themselves as risk assessments, and it's actually hurting hospitals and healthcare organizations because they're under the impression that they're taking a risk assessment on all of HIPAA's requirements. HIPAA Secure Now, for example, only covers 2 out of the 5 total HIPAA rules. And so when a customer goes and they assess themselves on that, they think that they are covering all their bases, and they're not. And so helping customers to understand things like that, saying, hey, how are you gauging yourself on all 5 HIPAA rules, that really is a conversation starter. I think as y'all leverage the Cyber Quick Check as well, that's going to help identify questions that you can be asking to healthcare organizations specifically.
Okay, thanks.
There are also other customers who are trying to acquire another healthcare practice, such as a dentist. And if that other dentist has, 4 locations, they actually use Cyber Quick Check for those other 4 locations just to see where their posture is before they do the acquisition.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well said, David.
Thanks.
All right. Well, I know we went over on time. Man, I thank y'all so much for taking the time. On behalf of the entire RSI team, it means the world to us. We would love feedback. We would love questions. We would love follow-up and interaction. Anything y'all need. We are going to be doing these webinars more frequently, but we want to make sure we're not covering the same information over and over. We want it to be catered to what the partner needs. As y'all are asking us questions, we will cater our future presentations to address those. So again, on behalf of RSI, thank you so much, and we hope to talk to each of y'all soon.